In the bustling rhythm of New York, where skyscrapers stretched toward a gray sky, Elizabeth Thompson sat quietly by the window of her modest Brooklyn apartment. At 73, her silver hair hung loosely and her deep eyes carried the weight of a life of sacrifice. As faint sunlight filtered through the street's trees each morning, Elizabeth would pick up an old photograph on her table, a picture of a family of three herself, her husband John and their young son Michael. John had passed away over 4 decades ago, leaving her with profound grief and heavy responsibilities. He died in a car accident on a rainy afternoon driving home from the machine shop. Michael was only 5, and Elizabeth, a vibrant woman with dreams of a happy family, suddenly faced a harsh reality, raising her son alone. Those years were a long chain of silent sacrifices. Elizabeth gave up her beloved office job to work 2 shifts daily cashier at a local supermarket, cleaning offices for Manhattan corporations by night. She vividly remembered sleepless nights at Michael's study table, helping him with math homework or telling fairy tales to chase away his fear of the dark. "I'll always be here for you," she whispered, despite aching feet and a sore back from labor. Money was tight, but Elizabeth never let Michael want for anything. She saved every penny, cutting her expenses so he could attend good schools and take extra classes. When Michael graduated from law school on a full scholarship, she wept like rain at the ceremony, her heart swelling with pride. She said, "You're everything to me," embracing her tall son, now a promising young lawyer. Elizabeth's life changes when Michael meets Sarah. Sarah was a beautiful, energetic nurse working at Manhattan's largest hospital. They met at a charity event, and within 6 months, Michael proposed under the dazzling neon lights of Times Square. Elizabeth was initially overjoyed, believing her son had found happiness. She helped plan the wedding, sew dresses for the bridesmaids, and even sell old jewelry to contribute to their honeymoon fund. But deep down, a vague unease stirred. Sarah always smiled sweetly, but her eyes sometimes glinted with calculation. "Your future daughter-in-law seems very ambitious," Elizabeth's brother William remarked during a family dinner. William, a renowned Wall Street lawyer, had been her rock since John's death. 10 years her senior, his professional experience made him wary of life's risks. Then came the day Elizabeth made the grandest decision of her life. After the wedding, Michael and Sarah lived in a cramped rented apartment in Queens, constantly complaining about New York's exorbitant living costs. Using her life savings, meager wages, John's insurance money, and bank interest, Elizabeth decided to buy a spacious Manhattan townhouse as a gift for her son. It was a charming 3-story home with a small backyard and a prime location near the city center. Worth millions, it didn't make her hesitate. "This is for you," she thought, picturing a family gathered, grandchildren playing. She wanted to spend her remaining years with her loved ones, no longer alone in her old apartment. But before signing the papers, William intervened. He accompanied her to the real estate office, his face stern behind thick glasses. "Elizabeth, keep the deed solely in your name," he said, placing a hand over hers as she reached for the pen. "Michael's your son, but Sarah, I'm not sure about her. This is just a precaution." Elizabeth felt guilty, as if she were betraying her son and daughter-in-law. "William, I trust Michael. He'd never hurt me," she protested. But William was firm. "Life has taught me that family can surprise you. Keep the deed in your name. If all goes well, you can transfer it later." Reluctantly, Elizabeth agreed. She signed the purchase, but the deed listed only Elizabeth Thompson. The key handover was on a golden autumn afternoon. Elizabeth stood before the new house, holding a bouquet of white roses, John's favorite. Michael and Sarah arrived. Michael's eyes sparkling like a child on Christmas morning. "Mom, you really did this," he exclaimed, hugging her tightly. Sarah beamed, kissing Elizabeth's cheek. "Mom, I don't know what to say. This is our dream." Elizabeth smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I want you to be happy. Everything I have is for you, Michael. I've sacrificed my life for your future. I only ask for a small room to live with you and hear my grandchildren's laughter." Michael nodded, squeezing her hand. "Of course, Mom. This is our home forever." They moved in the following week. Elizabeth chose a small second-floor room with a street-facing window. She brought her keepsakes, the family photo, John's watch, and a few old books. Life together began peacefully. Sarah cooked dinner, Michael shared work stories, and Elizabeth felt warmth after years of solitude. She told Sarah about her memories with John and how she overcame hardships to raise Michael. "I did it all for my son," she said, voice trembling. Sarah listened, nodding. "You're amazing, Mom. I'll take care of you like you took care of Michael. But soon minor signs emerged like tiny cracks in an old wall. Elizabeth's personal items were rearranged without her consent. I'm just helping you organize, Sarah said with a sweet smile. Dinner plans changed abruptly, often leaving Elizabeth out. Mom, I thought you knew, Michael said, his eyes avoiding hers. Her blood pressure pills vanished for days, reappearing in a new bottle looking slightly different. Elizabeth felt uneasy, but told herself maybe I'm old and forgetful. Yet deep down, a vague fear grew. She recalled William's words, just a precaution. Could this gift of maternal love become a burden? Elizabeth lay in bed at night, hearing laughter from the living room where Michael and Sarah watched movies. She smiled, but tears fell. I sacrificed everything for peace with my son, she thought. But the shadow of betrayal was quietly creeping in, waiting to erupt. The first days in the new Manhattan home were filled with joy, at least for Elizabeth. She woke each morning to the aroma of coffee wafting from the kitchen, Michael's laughter echoing from the living room. With her radiant smile, Sarah often brought her a hot cup of tea paired with sweet inquiries. Did you sleep well, Mom? What would you like for breakfast? Elizabeth felt warmed, as if her life's struggles were finally rewarded. She tidied her room and arranged precious keepsakes, the necklace John gave her on their wedding day and a notebook chronicling Michael's childhood milestones. This is our home, she whispered to herself, filled with hope for family dinners and afternoon storytelling to unborn grandchildren. But small changes began to creep in, like the first raindrops signaling a storm. It started with Elizabeth's personal belongings. She liked her dresser organized a particular way, medications in the top drawer, books by the right side of her bed. One morning she opened the dresser and found everything rearranged. Medications were moved to the bottom, books neatly stacked, but unfamiliarly so. Sarah. What did you do with my things? Elizabeth asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Sarah turned from the kitchen, holding a rag, smiling gently. Mom, I was helping you organize. You're getting older and scattered things can be confusing. This way's easier. Elizabeth felt a pang of discomfort, as if her private space had been invaded. But she told herself, maybe she's just trying to help. She nodded, suppressing the irritation rising within her. Then came the meal schedule. Elizabeth was accustomed to a light breakfast of toast and fruit, but Sarah began changing it without notice. One day, Elizabeth found the table set with a vegetable salad and no toast. I thought you should eat healthier, Mom, Sarah explained, her voice full of concern. You have high blood pressure. This is better for you. Elizabeth bit her lip, recalling late nights cooking Michael's favorite meals despite exhaustion. She ate, but her heart felt heavy, as if her preferences no longer mattered. When Michael came home, he brushed it off. Sarah's a nurse, Mom. She knows what's good for you. Don't worry. His words cut like a knife, wounding Elizabeth. She had sacrificed years to make her son a successful man, yet now he sided with his wife as if she were an uninvited guest. Tension built gradually. One afternoon, Elizabeth wanted to video call William. She opened her laptop, but the Wi-Fi wouldn't connect. What's wrong? She muttered, trying several times. Sarah walked in from the living room, holding the router's remote. I forgot to tell you, Mom. I set up a separate network for you called Guest Network. The main ones are too fast. You might get confused with passwords. This one's slower but stable, perfect for you. Elizabeth froze, feeling pushed to the sidelines. But I need a fast connection for William, she protested softly. Sarah smiled, her voice honeyed. Mom, this works fine. I did it so you wouldn't worry. Elizabeth sat there, hands trembling on the mouse, overcome with humiliation. She remembered teaching Michael to use their first home computer, learning from library books, despite her struggles. Now she was treated like an outdated elder, needing help to avoid being a burden. The medication issue was the final straw. Elizabeth had long managed her high blood pressure with daily pills. One day she opened her bottle and found it empty. Strange, I thought I had half left, she wondered, searching her room. 2 days later, the bottle reappeared in a new container, the pills looking slightly different, rounder, paler. Sarah, did you see my medication? Elizabeth asked, voice tinged with worry. While wiping the kitchen counter, Sarah turned with surprise. I found it behind the dresser yesterday and put it in a new bottle for cleanliness. Don't worry, it's the same. Elizabeth held the bottle, suspicion gnawing at her. She took the pills, but soon felt unusually fatigued, her mind foggy. Maybe I'm really getting old, she thought, but deep down a bad feeling stirred. When she told Michael, he shook his head. Mom, Sarah's a medical professional. She's just helping you organize. Don't overthink it. These actions led Elizabeth to withdraw. She spent less time out of her room, sitting by the window watching Manhattan's bustling streets. She missed John, desperately recalling evenings when he held her whispering, "You're my anchor." Now she felt adrift in the home she'd bought. At night she cried silently, tears soaking her pillow. What did I do wrong? Why is my daughter-in-law treating me like this? She asked herself, heart aching. Her love for Michael kept her patient, but her unease grew. She called William, voice trembling. Something feels off, William. Sarah's nice, but I feel like a burden. William comforted her. Keep an eye out. I'll help if you need me. But Elizabeth hesitated to escalate, fearing it would fracture her family. One sleepless night, Elizabeth went to the kitchen for tea. Creeping to avoid waking anyone, she overheard Sarah on the phone from the living room, laughing softly. Taking care of her is like minding a child, only worse. But the house is worth every second of this burden. Elizabeth froze, clutching the wall to steady herself. The words stabbed her heart like a sharp blade. Burden. Endure. The words echoed, bringing tears. She was no mother, no family. She was an obstacle tolerated for material gain. She crept back to her room, curling up on the bed, heart shattered. Her years of toil, sleepless nights for Michael were reduced to a burden. Clutching John's photo, she whispered, "John, what do I do?" The pain of family betrayal made her realize that the peaceful life was an illusion. From now on, she must be vigilant, protecting herself before it is too late. After that fateful night, Elizabeth could no longer sleep soundly. Sarah's words echoed in her mind like a relentless, haunting melody. Taking care of her is like minding a child, only worse. But the house is worth every second of this burden. Lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling, silent tears streamed down her face. How could this be? She had devoted her life to building a family, sacrificing youth, health, and dreams only to be seen as a bargaining chip. Elizabeth clutched her chest, a sharp pain, as if someone were squeezing her heart. She recalled days when Michael was young, staying up through feverish nights, wiping his brow and singing lullabies until her voice gave out. "I love you more than anything," she whispered to the darkness, but now that love seemed betrayed. The next morning, Elizabeth tried to maintain a standard facade in the kitchen. Sarah was brewing coffee, turning with a smile as if nothing had happened. "Up early? Mom want a sandwich?" Elizabeth nodded, but her hands trembled while holding the cup. She studied Sarah, searching for traces of deceit in her eyes. Sarah remained gentle and caring, but now every gesture felt suspicious. Elizabeth ate the bread sticking in her throat. Michael hurriedly ate breakfast before leaving for work, kissing her cheek. "Stay healthy, Mom." She watched him go, heart aching. Michael, her beloved son, seemed blind to what was happening. She wanted to scream to tell all, but fear of fracturing the family kept her silent. From then on, Elizabeth observed everything closely. The isolation crept in subtly, so gradually she almost missed it. Each morning she waited for the newspaper, a habit from John's time, reading news over coffee. But now it often vanished before she could touch it. "Sarah, have you seen the paper?" she asked once. Sarah shook her head, surprised. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe the delivery skipped today." But Elizabeth knew better. She sneaked downstairs earlier and found the paper hidden in the recycling bin. Her heart sank. Why do this? She felt cut off from the outside world, a prisoner in her home. Then came the calls from friends. Elizabeth had a few old friends, women of her time, who called to check in. Lately, her phone has been silent. She called a close friend in Brooklyn. "Haven't heard from you in ages," her friend said. "I called several times, but no one answered." Elizabeth was stunned. She checked her phone and saw missed calls not displayed on the main screen. Maybe Sarah blocked or redirected them, she thought, fear rising. She asked Sarah, "Did you touch my phone?" Sarah smiled. "Just updated the software, Mom. You're older, so it's easy to scam over the phone." The explanation sounded reasonable, but Elizabeth felt a chill. She was no longer in control, manipulated bit by bit. Family event invitations arrived late. One evening, Sarah and Michael returned cheerfully. "We had a great dinner with friends, Mom." Elizabeth blinked. "Why didn't you invite me?" Sarah shrugged. "Oh, I told you last week. Forgot." But Elizabeth was sure she hadn't been told. She remembered sitting alone in her room, hearing their laughter downstairs. Loneliness overwhelmed her, bringing silent tears. Hadn't she sacrificed everything for this family? Now she was sidelined like an outdated relic. "I'm not a burden," she told herself, wiping tears. But the words offered little comfort. Medication remained an obsession. After the bottle vanished, Elizabeth counted her pills daily. One morning, she found the pills different, rounder, pale yellow instead of white. Holding one, she sniffed it strange. Suspicious, she pretended to take it, but pocketed it. That afternoon, she slipped out to the pharmacy. The elderly pharmacist, a friend, frowned. Mrs. Thompson, these aren't your blood pressure pills. They're mild sedatives for calming nerves. Elizabeth froze, hands and feet cold. Who? Who could have switched them? She whispered. He shook his head. I don't know, but be careful. This could be intentional. She left legs unsteady, mind reeling. Sarah, the nurse, daughter-in-law, what was she doing, making her foggy easier to control? That evening, Elizabeth waited for Michael, hoping he'd listen, protect her. As he sat on the sofa, she trembled. Michael, my pills were switched. They're sedatives. I think Sarah. Michael cut her off. Tired, Mom. It's probably a mix-up. Sarah's a nurse. She knows what she's doing. Maybe you got the wrong batch. Tears rolled down her face. You don't believe me. I raised you, sacrificed everything. Michael sighed, patting her shoulder. Don't overthink, Mom. I'll ask Sarah. But Elizabeth knew he wouldn't ask, blinded by love by his new life. She went to her room, locked the door, and sat by the window, watching Manhattan's streetlights flicker. Family pain cut like a knife, not from enemies, but from her own flesh and blood. That night, Elizabeth lay awake, memories flooding like a tide. She recalled Michael's elementary graduation, sewing him a suit from scraps, despite pricked fingers, and late nights at the dinner table waiting for him to return from the university library. All for you, she thought, but now reduced to a burden. She clenched her fists, a new resolve rising. I won't be a victim. I must reclaim my dignity. She didn't know how, but the pain ignited a hidden strength. From now on, she would watch, remember, and find a way out of this spiral. The family she cherished most had become a battlefield, and Elizabeth had to fight to survive. Days after that fateful night, Elizabeth felt trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Sarah's words, caring for her is like minding a child, only worse. But the house is worth every second of this burden, stabbed her heart, making each breath painful. She lived in constant vigilance, like a caged animal, observing every gesture, every word in the home that was once her pride. But loneliness engulfed her. Michael, her son, seemed a stranger, consumed by work or Sarah's world. Their rare talks were curt, his eyes glued to his phone, lacking the warmth of old. Elizabeth felt like a ghost in the home she'd bought with her life's savings. One rainy afternoon, Elizabeth left the house for fresh air. She walked Manhattan's streets, her umbrella tilted against the drizzle, her heart heavy. She paused at a small park, golden leaves falling in the autumn breeze. She met Margaret Hayes, a neighbor she had only known for a few months. Margaret, in her 60s, with short gray hair and sharp yet warm eyes, had met Elizabeth at a neighborhood book club where she sought to reconnect with the world after isolation. A retired elder law attorney, Margaret exuded a quiet strength that felt safe. That day, Margaret sat on a bench reading a detective novel. Seeing Elizabeth, she smiled and waved. Mrs. Thompson, join me. Braving the rain for a walk is a bold move. Elizabeth sat reluctantly, forcing a smile. But Margaret's keen intuition sensed trouble. What's wrong? You look like you haven't slept in a week. Elizabeth hesitated, eyes averted. She wanted to keep things private, fearing that speaking would shatter the perfect family image she'd built. But Margaret's sincere gaze broke her defenses. Margaret, I don't know where to start, she whispered, voice trembling. Things at home. They're not right. Under the umbrella, Elizabeth poured out her heart. She spoke of Sarah rearranging her belongings, blocking friends' calls, hiding newspapers, and worse, altering her medication. She recounted overhearing Sarah on the phone, treating her as a burden for the house's sake. She said, I gave my life for Michael, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Now I feel like I'm no longer a mother, just an obstacle. Margaret listened without interrupting, her eyes darkening with anger and empathy. When Elizabeth mentioned the sedatives, Margaret gripped her hand. Elizabeth, this isn't just disrespect. This is elder abuse. The word abuse jolted Elizabeth like a slap. No, it can't be, she protested weakly. Michael's not like that. Sarah blinds him. Margaret shook her head, voice stern. Intent doesn't matter. What's happening is wrong, Elizabeth. You can't keep living like this. She pulled a small leather notebook and a tiny recorder from her bag, handing them to Elizabeth. Document everything, dates, events, details. If this escalates, you'll need evidence. Elizabeth took the notebook, hands shaking. I can't do this to my son, she said, voice choked. Michael's my everything. Margaret held her shoulder, eyes resolute. I understand, Elizabeth. I've seen cases like yours in my 15 years as an elder law attorney. I know you love your son, but you must love yourself too. If you don't protect yourself, who will? Margaret's words were a small flame igniting hope and fear in Elizabeth. She nodded, clutching the notebook, feeling she'd found an ally in the storm. In the days that followed, Elizabeth began documenting. Each time Sarah moved her belongings, she noted, "On October 10th, Sarah moved my pillbox from the top to the bottom drawer and said it's easier to find." When friends' calls didn't come, she wrote October 12th, no call from Jane, though she said she tried 3 times. She hid the notebook in an old book Sarah never touched. She hesitated to use Margaret's recorder, feeling it betrayed Michael. But each day the isolation grew clearer. Once she tried joining a dinner with Michael and Sarah's friends, but Sarah interrupted, "Mocking Mom's stories are so old no one listens anymore." Michael gave a strained smile, saying nothing. Elizabeth left the table early, heartbroken. In her room, she wrote October 15th, "Sarah humiliated me in front of Michael's friends. I feel invisible." Margaret became Elizabeth's sole anchor. They met more often, not just at the park, but at a nearby cafe. Once, Margaret invited her, serving Earl Grey in delicate porcelain cups. "Elizabeth, you look exhausted," she said, touching her hand. "You need to talk to someone besides me." Any trusted lawyer, Elizabeth thought of William, but didn't want to burden him, fearing his worry. "I'll handle it," she said, voice unconvincing. Margaret didn't push, only said softly, "I'm here whenever you need me." The notebook became Elizabeth's silent confidant. Each night she wrote as if talking to herself, to John, to lost times. She wrote of the pain of Sarah's disdain, of Michael's silence like an unhealing wound. But through each line she felt a new strength. She wrote that, "I won't let them make me a victim," hands trembling with anger and resolve. Margaret was right. She had to fight not just for dignity, but for her very life. Unbeknownst to her, the real storm lay ahead, and darker secrets about Sarah would soon surface, thrusting her into an unrelenting battle for freedom. Elizabeth woke in her small room, faint sunlight filtering through the curtains, illuminating the leather notebook Margaret had given her. Last night she barely slept, haunted by Sarah's cruel words. "Taking care of her is like minding a child, only worse. But the house is worth every second of this burden." The notebook's entries were now evidence of a painful truth: she was no longer a mother or her daughter-in-law's eyes. But Elizabeth refused to drown in sorrow. She clenched her fists, determined, "I must find the truth, protect myself." The notebook was her weapon. Today she would take another step to face the coming storm. That morning, Elizabeth resolved to search for more clues in the house. She had to overcome her fear of being caught to understand Sarah's intentions. While Sarah was shopping and Michael was at work, she crept through the hallway steps, light as if not to wake a sleeping beast. She paused at Michael's office door, now Sarah's domain. Unlocked, perhaps due to Sarah's confidence that Elizabeth wouldn't dare enter, she pushed it open, heart pounding. Inside the desk was piled with papers, Sarah's laptop open screen dimly lit. Elizabeth avoided the computer, her eyes drawn to a green folder on the bookshelf. She opened it, hands trembling. Inside was a house appraisal report with detailed notes on renovation potential and quick sale options. Elizabeth's blood ran cold. The house her life savings gifted to her son was now a target for profit. But what froze her was brochures for a nursing home in suburban New York, monthly fees circled in red. Named Golden Haven, they included handwritten notes: "Good option, affordable, far from downtown." Elizabeth felt punched in the chest. They planned to shunt her to a nursing home, sell the house, and erase her existence like unwanted furniture. "How dare they?" she whispered, hot tears streaming. She kept searching each second, feeling like a century. In a loosely locked drawer key hidden under a small potted plant, she found something that stopped her heart: a partially completed mental competency evaluation form. The pages listed fabricated incidents. Mrs. Thompson tried cooking at 3 a.m., nearly causing a fire. Mrs. Thompson forgot her grandchild's name. Mrs. Thompson behaves erratically and needs supervision. Elizabeth trembled, reading each line. None had happened. The listed witnesses, a neighbor, a colleague of Sarah's she'd never met. They were building a false narrative to declare her mentally incompetent, seizing control of her assets. Elizabeth grabbed her phone, snapping photos of each page, careful not to leave traces. Back in her room, she collapsed on the bed, covering her face. She thought they wanted to take everything: house dignity and self-determination. The betrayal by her son and daughter-in-law was a crushing wave. But in despair, a fire of anger flared. She recalled Margaret's words, "You need evidence." Elizabeth opened the notebook, writing October 18th, found fake mental evaluation forms in Michael's office, nursing home brochures. They planned to sell the house. Her suspicion about the medication grew clearer. Elizabeth compared a new pill to one she'd hidden. They differed. New ones were smaller, pale yellow, and not blood pressure pills. She decided not to take them, hiding them in an old jewelry box. That afternoon, she slipped to the pharmacy where the elderly pharmacist confirmed, "These are sedatives, Mrs. Thompson, not blood pressure pills." "Who gave you these?" Elizabeth didn't answer, only thanked him and left mind spinning. Sarah, a nurse, knew how to switch pills undetected. Why? To make her foggy, controllable, or worse, to justify a nursing home with mental instability. That evening, Elizabeth confronted Michael. Home tired from a long day, she called him to her room. "Michael, I need to talk," she began, voice shaking. "My pills. They're not blood pressure meds, they're sedatives. I found forms in your office about a nursing home and mental evaluations. What do you know?" Michael frowned, looking at her as if she'd said something absurd. "Mom, you're imagining things. Sarah's a nurse. She wants what's best for you. What forms? You're tired, rest." Elizabeth stared, hoping to glimpse the boy she raised, but saw only avoidance. "Michael, I'm your mother. I gave my life for you. Don't you see something's wrong?" she asked, tears falling. Michael sighed, standing. "I'm tired, Mom. I'll ask Sarah. It's probably a misunderstanding." He left, leaving Elizabeth with pain like salt in a wound. She sat clutching the notebook, writing October 18th. "Michael didn't believe me. He defended Sarah and called me imaginative. His rejection hurt more than Sarah's cruel words. But it ignited strength within her. She remembered Margaret, her only believer who gave her tools to fight. She called, voice trembling, but resolute. "Margaret, I have evidence. They want to put me in a nursing home. Take the house." Margaret replied instantly, "Come to my place, Elizabeth. We'll plan." That afternoon at Margaret's cozy suburban home, Elizabeth recounted everything. Margaret listened, gripping her teacup, eyes darkening with anger. "This isn't just abuse," she said. "It's a calculated plot. Elizabeth, you must act before it's too late." Margaret suggested contacting an old elder law attorney, but Elizabeth shook her head. "I'm not ready. I need more proof, certainty." Margaret nodded, emphasizing, "You're not alone. I'm here and we'll make them pay." Elizabeth hugged her, tears falling. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone. But deep down, she knew the battle was beginning, and darker secrets about Sarah would soon emerge, pushing her onto an irreversible path. Elizabeth sat in her small room, dim light from the desk lamp illuminating the leather notebook where she recorded the dark secrets she'd uncovered. The fake mental evaluation forms, house appraisal report, and nursing home brochures haunted her. But what shook her most was the suspicion about her medication sedatives replacing her blood pressure pills, a silent plot to weaken her. Elizabeth clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. They want to take everything she thought house dignity, perhaps her life. But she was no longer a frail, compliant woman. Her meeting with Margaret had ignited a fighting spirit, and now she resolved to pursue the truth. She recalled the small recorder Margaret gave her, tucked in a drawer beneath an embroidered handkerchief John gifted her for an anniversary. Elizabeth held it, fingers tracing its cold metal. She told herself, "I have to do this," though her heart ached at recording her son's conversations. But the office findings, fake documents, and nursing home plans left her no choice. She needed evidence not just to protect herself, but to face the painful truth. Elizabeth crept to the living room as Sarah and Michael slept that evening. The house was silent save for the ticking wall clock. She searched for a spot to hide the recorder, choosing a coffee table with a small gap under its decorative wood. Hands trembling, she activated it and tucked it in, ensuring it was undetectable. Just one night, she thought, hoping for innocent chatter. But deep down, she knew better. The next morning, with Sarah at work and Michael at his law office, Elizabeth retrieved the recorder. In her locked room, she plugged in earphones, heart pounding like awaiting a verdict. At first, only footsteps, clinking dishes, and faint TV sounds. Then Sarah's voice, cold and sharp. "The doctor says we need more erratic behavior examples before a formal evaluation." Elizabeth stopped breathing, gripping the earphones. Michael's hesitant voice replied, "I'm uncomfortable with this, Sarah." Sarah scoffed, mocking, "Do it like with your father. Adjust the meds a bit and results will come fast." Elizabeth felt the floor collapse, like with your father. The words stabbed her heart. John, her beloved husband, gone too soon after a brief illness. What did he have to do with Sarah? She recalled his final hospital days when Sarah was a new nurse. Grief-stricken Elizabeth had trusted the medical team, never suspecting. Now, Sarah's words suggested a horrific possibility. Was John's death natural? She covered her face, tears streaming. "What did they do to you, John?" she whispered, betrayed again, not just by her daughter-in-law, but by memories of her late husband. She replayed the recording, each listen a fresh wound. Sarah continued, gentle but calculating. "Sweetheart, don't you want that Hamptons vacation home? Sell this house, put her in a nursing home, and we'll have it all." Michael paused, then said softly, "I don't want Mom to suffer." Sarah cut in, sweet but icy. "She won't suffer. Golden Haven is friendly. She'll be cared for, and we'll be free." Elizabeth stopped the recorder, unable to bear more. She threw the earphones onto the bed, body shaking with anger and pain. Michael, her son, raised, with all her heart, had acquiesced, however hesitantly, to this cruel plan. She opened the notebook, scribbling October 20th, recording confirms. "Sarah plans to adjust my meds to make me seem incompetent. They mentioned doing the same to John." Each word was a cut and a reminder she had to act. She called Margaret, voice choked. "Margaret, I have proof, Sarah. She said they did something to John like they did to me." Margaret urged her to come over, and within an hour, Elizabeth was in Margaret's cozy living room recounting everything. Margaret listened, face darkening. "Elizabeth, this isn't just abuse, it's criminal. You need an independent doctor to check your health, and we must plan to protect you." That afternoon, Margaret took Elizabeth to a trusted doctor who confirmed she was fully lucid with no mental decline. Examining her pill sample, he shook his head. "These are low-dose sedatives, not for your blood pressure. Who gave you these?" Elizabeth didn't answer, asking for confidentiality. On the way back, Margaret held her hand. "You must leave that house, Elizabeth. It's not safe." But Elizabeth shook her head, voice firm. "Not yet. I need more proof to know what they did to John. I can't let them win." From that day, Elizabeth lived like a spy in her own home. She pretended to take the pills, flushing them down the sink. She maintained a tired, slow demeanor, as if the sedatives worked to avoid Sarah's suspicion. Each night she checked the recorder, gathering more conversations. Once she heard Sarah on the phone. "She's getting worse. The doctor will approve an evaluation soon." Elizabeth noted it, hands shaking with anger. She knew she was on a dangerous edge, but the pain of John's loss and Michael's betrayal drove her forward. "I won't let them steal my life," she thought, eyes sharp in Manhattan's darkness. Her battle was now not just for dignity, but for justice for her late husband and her own survival. Elizabeth lived on edge, and each step in the Manhattan house was calculated. She feigned weakness, occasionally acting distracted to keep Sarah unsuspecting, but inside she was a smoldering fire awaiting eruption. The hidden recorder under the coffee table captured Sarah's cruel words, her ruthless plans to seize the house and send Elizabeth to a nursing home. But what pained Elizabeth most was Michael's hesitant voice, her son, once her world, now caught in betrayal's vortex. Sarah's mention of John, like with your father, haunted her, making her question, did her husband die naturally, or did Sarah have a hand in it? She decided to host a special dinner for Michael's law firm promotion. Elizabeth wanted one last chance to see a spark in her son, to believe he was still the boy who hugged her, saying, "Mom, you're my hero." She spent all day in the kitchen, meticulously preparing rosemary potato beef roast, Michael's college favorite. She set the table with her finest dishes, recreating past happy days. But when Sarah entered, she eyed the table with disdain. "These plates, Mom. Really. It's a promotion party, not a nursing home lunch." Elizabeth bit her lip, swallowing pain. She looked to Michael, hoping he'd speak, but he only smiled awkwardly. "Everything looks great, Mom." Dinner began in a stifling atmosphere. Elizabeth tried to join in, sharing stories of Michael's early law firm days, nervous before meetings. But each time she spoke, Sarah interrupted or corrected. "That's not right, Mom. Michael said it differently. Pay attention." Elizabeth felt pushed aside, an uninvited guest in her own home. Then, in a careless moment, Sarah knocked over her red wine, staining the white tablecloth. She stood pointing at Elizabeth. "See. Your rambling distracted me." Elizabeth was stunned, disbelieving. Sarah had spilled the wine, yet she was blamed for humiliating her. Something in Elizabeth shattered. Months of enduring, pretending, and hoping vanished. She stood, hands trembling but voice firm. "Don't blame me. This is my house too, Sarah." The table fell silent. Michael looked down, avoiding her gaze. Sarah, eyes icy, responded slowly. "Your house? You're just an unwelcome guest here." Elizabeth turned to Michael, pleading, "Son, do you let her talk to me like this?" But Michael stayed silent. eyes averted, burying his emotions. His silence hurt more than any words. Emboldened by Michael's cowardice, Sarah stood leaned close and spat words that changed everything. "I hope you die soon. It'd be a relief for us all." Elizabeth froze, breath halted. The curse wasn't just an insult, it denied all her sacrifices, years of grueling work to raise Michael, sleepless nights worrying for him. She looked at Michael, begging for defense a word. He only bowed his head deeper, gripping his glass silent. Elizabeth turned, climbing the stairs, each step dragging a collapsing world. In her room, she locked the door, collapsed on the bed, and sobbed. The pain wasn't just Sarah's, it was Michael's silence, her beloved son. She opened the notebook, scrawling October 25th. "Sarah wished me dead. Michael said nothing. My son betrayed me." The words blurred with tears. She heard muffled arguments from the living room, Sarah's sharp voice dominating Michael's weak protests, yielding. Elizabeth knew she couldn't stay in this house where family love was replaced by calculation. At dawn, as sunlight crept through the curtains, Elizabeth called Margaret. "I have to leave," she said, voice choked but resolute. "I can't stay another day." Margaret replied instantly. "Come to my place, Elizabeth. We'll figure it out." Elizabeth quietly prepared, taking a small suitcase from under the bed and packing essentials, documents, clothes, a family photo, and John's watch. Before leaving, she wrote a note, went to bed. "You wished me dead. To you, I'm now dead." Elizabeth left on a Tuesday morning with Sarah on an early shift and Michael attending a meeting. She stepped out, heart pounding, as if escaping a prison. She walked to the corner where Margaret waited in her old green car. Margaret said, "You're doing the right thing," holding her hand as she sat. "This isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation." Elizabeth glanced back at the house, eyes pained but resolute. The home, her life's gift to her son, was now her jail. She turned away, tears falling, but a new strength formed. Elizabeth was given the guest room at Margaret's with a fold-out bed ready. Margaret brewed tea, sitting across with a serious gaze. "We need a plan. You own the house, and we have evidence. They'll pay." Elizabeth nodded, gripping her cup. She thought of John Michael and her years of sacrifice. "I want justice," she said, voice trembling but strong, "not just for me, but for John. I need to know what they did to him." Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll do it. But first, you must be safe." Elizabeth looked out the window, eyes distant. She knew the battle wouldn't be easy, but she was ready. Michael and Sarah's betrayal had pushed her to the edge, and now she'd fight to reclaim her life. Elizabeth sat in Margaret's cozy guest room, soft light from a hanging lamp illuminating family photos on the walls. The small suburban Manhattan house was a haven, but her heart remained heavy. The note she left, "You wished me dead. I'm now dead to you," was a declaration of severing ties with the Manhattan home. But the pain didn't fade easily. Closing her eyes, she saw Michael's averted gaze, heard Sarah's venomous curse. "I hope you die soon. It'd be a relief for us all." Elizabeth clutched her small suitcase, holding her most precious keepsakes, the photo of John and Michael, John's watch, and the notebook chronicling every painful truth. Margaret entered, carrying a tray of hot tea. "Are you okay, Elizabeth?" she asked, eyes full of concern. Elizabeth shook her head, tears falling silently. "I don't know, Margaret. I gave Michael everything, my life, my heart. Now I'm left with this, a suitcase and broken pieces." Margaret sat beside her, holding her hand. "You have more than that. You have strength, you have me, and we'll make them pay." Margaret's words were a spark, reigniting Elizabeth's resolve. She wiped her tears, nodding. "I want justice, not just for me, but for John. I need the truth about his death." Margaret nodded, retrieving a stack of documents from the table. "I've contacted Richard, my old elder law colleague. He and his young associate, Daniel, specialize in financial and elder abuse. They're coming this afternoon." Elizabeth eyed the documents, hope mingling with fear. "But the house—" "I said it was a gift for Michael. Can they contest it?" Margaret smiled faintly. "You listened to William. The deed's in your name. That's our most significant advantage." That afternoon, Richard and Daniel arrived, exuding professionalism and calm. Richard, a silver-haired man in his 60s with a warm voice, began. "Mrs. Thompson, based on your documents, it's clear. The house is entirely yours, legally airtight." Elizabeth frowned, voice trembling. "But I said it was a gift for my son," Daniel, younger with sharp eyes, interjected. You only said it no deed transfer. Verbal gifts aren't legally binding. They have no claim. Elizabeth exhaled, but pain lingered. She'd wanted to give her son the world, but now that gift was her shield. Richard outlined a plan. You can demand they leave or sell the house. With your evidence, fake forms recordings, we can sue for elder abuse. But first you need safety. Elizabeth nodded, eyes distant. I need to know about John. Sarah said they did something to him like they did to me. I can't let it go. Daniel nodded. I have a contact at the hospital where Mr. Thompson died. I'll investigate, but it'll take time. Elizabeth agreed, heart heavy but resolute. Margaret proposed a bold idea. Elizabeth, we should publish a fake obituary. Vague enough to unsettle them, but legal. Elizabeth was stunned. An obituary? For me? Margaret nodded, eyes gleaming. They want you gone. We'll make them think you are. It's how we take control. The idea was both terrifying and satisfying. Elizabeth agreed, and 2 days later, a brief obituary appeared in the New York Times. Elizabeth Thompson, 73, passed peacefully after a short illness, private services per family request. Simultaneously, Elizabeth signed papers to sell the Manhattan house through a real estate agency Margaret recommended. The agent, Linda, understood the sensitive situation and promised discretion. Want a quick sale? Linda asked. Elizabeth nodded, as fast as possible. I want no more ties. Linda nodded. I have a Chicago couple ready to buy at full price, agreeing to a 30-day move-out for current occupants. Elizabeth signed, feeling like she'd cut out a piece of her heart. But she knew this wasn't defeat, it was liberation. Meanwhile, Elizabeth lived a secret life at Margaret's. She hid the fake pills, replacing them with vitamin C from a hollowed-out book Margaret provided. She feigned distraction in calls with Sarah as if the sedatives worked. You okay, Mom? Sarah asked, voice falsely sweet. I'm tired, Elizabeth replied, deliberately slow. She heard Sarah whisper, She's worsening. Results soon. Elizabeth hung up, hands shaking with anger. She thought she'd won, but she was steering the game. Margaret helped set up remote security cameras linked to the Manhattan house via her tech-savvy son's system. The night the obituary appeared, they watched Michael and Sarah's reaction. Michael entered, flipping through a newspaper casually. At the obituary page, he stopped, face pale. Sarah, he shouted, voice panicked. Sarah ran in, read it, and scoffed. How could she die? It's a trick. But as they called hospitals and newspapers with no answers, Michael slumped on the sofa, head in hands, while Sarah made frantic calls, voice rising. Elizabeth watched, torn between pain and satisfaction. They're panicking, she said, voice trembling. Margaret held her hand. They deserve it. But Elizabeth couldn't smile. She thought of Michael, the boy who held her hand in the park, now distraught to think she was gone. I don't want to hurt him, she whispered. Margaret replied, You're not hurting. They brought this on themselves. Elizabeth nodded, knowing the journey would hurt more. She needed justice for John and wouldn't stop until the truth was out. That evening, Elizabeth sat in Margaret's guest room, gazing at the moonlit garden. She opened her notebook, writing October 28th, fake obituary published. They're rattled. My fight has begun. She closed her eyes, envisioning her new Cape Cod home where she'd rebuild her life. But first she had to face the mystery of John's death and Michael's betrayal. This battle wasn't just for property, it was for her soul. Elizabeth sat in Margaret's cozy home, morning light streaming through the window, illuminating John's photo on the table. The room smelled of fresh coffee, but her heart remained heavy. Escaping the Manhattan house had freed her from Sarah's grip and Michael's painful silence, but each day brought a new void, the absence of the family once everything to her. The fake obituary in the New York Times and the house sale had thrown Sarah and Michael into chaos, but Elizabeth felt no triumph. Instead, a deep sadness mingled with resolve to rebuild her life. Margaret entered, holding new documents from Richard. Elizabeth News, she said calmly. The house is officially sold to the Chicago couple. They've paid in full, and Sarah and Michael have 3 weeks to leave. Elizabeth nodded, eyes distant. It's done, she whispered. The house I bought with my life, now someone else's. Margaret took her hand. No, Elizabeth. It freed you. Now you can start anew. Elizabeth gave a faint smile, but inside she knew the journey wasn't over. John's death lingered like a shadow, demanding answers. That day, Daniel Richards' associate called about the hospital investigation into John's death. I contacted a former nurse, Sarah Jenkins, and he said she reported irregularities in Mr. Thompson's medication. But she was transferred after Sarah, your daughter-in-law, complained about her. Elizabeth gripped the phone, heart racing. What irregularities? She asked, voice trembling. Daniel explained painkiller doses were misrecorded, some given early. Jenkins suspected tampering, but no direct proof. Elizabeth felt breathless. Sarah. She was there when John died, she whispered. Daniel promised to dig deeper, but warned. Proving this after years is tough. Elizabeth sat quietly, clutching John's photo. She remembered his final days, his weak but smiling eyes. You're my light, he'd said, despite the pain. Now suspecting Sarah had hastened his death made her tremble with anger and grief. She opened her notebook, writing November 2nd. Daniel confirmed suspicions about John's meds. Sarah may have harmed him. I must find justice. Through security cameras, Elizabeth and Margaret watched Sarah and Michael's downfall. One evening, Sarah stormed home, face flushed with rage. They suspended me, she screamed, throwing her bag. The nursing board is investigating old hospital reports. Michael on the sofa looked up wearily. Investigating what? Did you do something? Sarah snapped. Don't play dumb. Michael, your mother's behind this. I know it. Elizabeth watched, torn between satisfaction and pain. Sarah was paying, but Michael, her son, remained blind. Tensions escalated. One night, Elizabeth saw footage of Michael rummaging in the attic, finding a box of her ruined keepsakes, photos, jewelry diaries Sarah claimed were lost. Pale, he confronted her. You said these were destroyed, Sarah. Why hide them? Sarah shrugged coldly. Just junk, Michael. I don't need them, Michael shouted the first time Elizabeth saw him defy his wife. They weren't yours to decide. The argument ended with Sarah declaring, this marriage was a transaction, Michael. You offered stability, I gave companionship. It's no longer worth it. She announced a job move to Chicago, leaving him amid the wreckage. Elizabeth's heart clenched watching. She hadn't expected Michael to face the truth so late. But she couldn't soften. She'd sent them a $5,000 check with a move-out notice. She told Margaret to close this chapter, not because they deserve it. Margaret nodded. You're buying your freedom, Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Elizabeth built her new life. She found a small Cape Cod cottage with sea views and a garden. The agent Susan showed her around. It needs work but has potential. Elizabeth smiled, feeling hope after months. I want a project to rebuild my life. She envisioned pale blue walls, a hydrangea garden, and evenings by the sea. The cottage wasn't just a home, it was her renaissance. Elizabeth shopped for her new home with Margaret's help, choosing simple, meaningful items, a cozy reading chair, seascape paintings, and gardening tools. You deserve joy, Margaret said when Elizabeth hesitated over a small chandelier. Elizabeth nodded, learning to love herself again. She wrote November 5th, signed Cape Cod house contract. I'm restarting not for revenge, but for me. One afternoon, Daniel brought news. The nursing board opened a formal investigation into Sarah. 2 former colleagues confirmed her medication tampering. Elizabeth clenched her fists, emotions mixed. And John? Anything on him, she asked. Daniel shook his head. No direct proof yet, but we're digging. Time will tell. Elizabeth nodded, knowing justice for John might take years, but she wouldn't give up. That evening, Elizabeth sat in Margaret's garden, gazing at the twinkling moon. She thought of Michael, his attic confrontation with Sarah. Was he truly remorseful, or just scared of losing everything she didn't know, but she knew she'd reclaimed herself? The Cape Cod cottage garden and free days ahead proved a strength she hadn't known she had. Betrayal nearly destroyed her, but now it was the foundation for a new life where she was her master. Elizabeth stood on the porch of her small Cape Cod cottage, the salty sea breeze carrying a sense of freedom she'd long craved. The new home, with pale blue walls and a hydrangea garden awaiting spring, symbolized her rebirth. 3 months had passed since she left the Manhattan house, escaping Sarah's control and Michael's painful silence. Each morning she woke to crashing waves, brewed coffee, and sat in her armchair facing the sea. She felt truly alive for the first time in years, not merely surviving. The Cape Cod cottage was more than a refuge, it was where Elizabeth rediscovered herself. She painted the walls, planted initial flowers, and arranged John's keepsakes, his watch books, family photo on a self-made wooden shelf. Each item was a piece of the past, no longer painful but comforting. Elizabeth was no longer the betrayed mother or lonely widow. Elizabeth Thompson was a 73-year-old rewriting her life's story. While tending her garden one afternoon, Elizabeth received a thick envelope from Michael. It arrived unexpectedly with no return address, only her name in his familiar handwriting. She left it on the kitchen table for 3 days, eyeing it like a volatile object. Finally, on a rainy afternoon as Cape Cod sea roared, she brewed tea, sat, and opened it. Inside was a long letter and a minor key. "Mom," it began. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I must write. I was wrong, terribly wrong. I let Sarah manipulate me, let you be hurt. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I'm trying to understand my mistakes." Michael wrote of therapy sessions, realizing his complicity in Sarah's abuse. He wrote that I stayed silent when you needed me most, and I'll carry this regret forever. The key opened a Cambridge storage unit holding John's watchbooks, vinyl records, and his leather armchair. "They belong to you, not me. I want to return what you deserve." Elizabeth folded the letter, hands trembling. She didn't cry, but her heart ached, not from anger, but a deep sadness for what was lost. She called Margaret, sharing the letter. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked gently. Elizabeth sighed. "I don't know. Part of me wants to close that door forever. But part hopes Michael can change even a little." Margaret nodded over the phone. "You don't need to decide now. Give yourself time." Elizabeth tucked the letter in a drawer and hung the key by the door. She wasn't ready to face John's keepsakes, but she knew she'd need to open that door one day, not for Michael, but for herself. Weeks later, Elizabeth drove to the Cambridge storage unit. She sat in her car for nearly half an hour, the key cold in her hand. Finally, she entered opening Unit 217. Inside were 6 neatly labeled boxes, a vintage record player, and John's leather armchair. A note on the chair read, "I saved what I could." Elizabeth opened the first box and found John's vinyl collection, Coltrane Fitzgerald, and the soundtrack of their early marriage. The second held books from novels to his academic works. The third was photo albums wedding Michael's childhood family vacations. Sitting in the armchair, Elizabeth leafed through photos, tears falling. Not from pain, but liberation. These keepsakes, like part of her soul, were saved. She arranged for everything but the armchair to be shipped to Cape Cod, taking it home immediately. Placing it on her porch, facing the sea, she felt John beside her, smiling. "You'd love this place," she whispered. A week later, Michael emailed, "Did you find anything in the storage?" Elizabeth replied briefly. "Yes. Thank you for keeping them," he responded. "There's a cafe in Gloucester Harbor View. I go there some Saturday afternoons. Not an invitation, but an opening." Elizabeth pondered for 3 weeks. On a crisp December Saturday, she drove to Harbor View. The small, cozy cafe had sea-facing windows. Michael sat in a corner, thinner, older shoulders stooped. He didn't see her at first. Elizabeth watched, torn between love and pain. Finally, she approached. "I didn't think I'd come," she said, sitting across. Michael looked up, eyes wide. "I didn't dare hope." They sat in heavy but honest silence. "You look different," Elizabeth said. "So do you," Michael replied. "Cape Cod suits you." They talked not of forgiveness or reconciliation, but simple things: her garden, his new job at a smaller law firm. Elizabeth pulled a small package from her bag. "Your father's pocket watch. He'd want you to have it." Michael stared, shaking his head. "I don't deserve it." Elizabeth placed it on the table. "It's yours anyway." After an hour, they parted. Michael asking, "Can I call you sometimes?" Elizabeth nodded. "Yes, but not often. Not yet." Elizabeth sat in John's armchair in Cape Cod, watching the sunset. She felt neither triumph nor closure, only a new peace. The cottage garden and days ahead proved her reclaimed strength. Michael and Sarah's betrayal nearly destroyed her, but it became the foundation for a new life she defined, free from sacrifice or duty. Closing her eyes, breathing the sea air, Elizabeth smiled. She had liberated herself, her most significant victory.